Good evening and welcome everyone to this wonderful session and day 2 of the WaterBridge RevItUp Summit. Super excited and stoked to have Kirthiga Reddy with us. And let me take this opportunity to very quickly introduce her and dive right into our session today. Kirthiga needs really no introduction. She's been there, done that, done it all, I would say. And she's been a tech executive, Facebook's first employee, in India, and after being an operator for many years, she's also been an investor, being Softbank's first female partner. And then she's moved on to continuing to being president at the Athena SPAC, and of course, board member at WeWork and Pair. And now I can add author, if I may. And she has a book that all of us are eaggerly looking forward to called The Opportunity Engine. Thank you so much.
Third chapter is due tomorrow, and I'll be doing an all night to actually finish that. So yes, thank you for reminding me.
No, thank you so much for joining us. The audience this evening is largely early stage founders from the Indian startup ecosystem. And straight off the bat, since I have the mic, would love to just firstly ask you, how do you really do it all, keep it all together, and just keep scaling yourself, your skill sets, and keep rolling all the time?
If I may actually add, there must be a private plane waiting somewhere, because if I just follow your LinkedIn, I don't know, I see you in front of NYSE, and then in 24 hours you're in California, Sausalito, or somewhere else. So I'm just adding a little subtext to Anjali's question. Tell us how you manage all of this.
No private jet. If there was one superpower that I wish I would have, it would be that ability to teleport myself to wherever I want to be. I do travel really well. So for me, a flight at any time of the day means nothing. It's just 5 hours of work. So I think that is part of my secret, and not something I recommend, but I do well on low sleep as well, but it's not something that I recommend, and I'm not proud of it. But so let's jump in. So one, just so excited to be here at this year's RevItUp. I have, of course, known Manish from the time this was a concept, and to see that take fruition and to see it going from strength to strength, and Anjali having the ability to have this conversation with you is just incredible. And they are a big example of RevItUp themselves, and what they do for founders, the heart and soul and spirit they put into each conversation, each founder, whether they invest in the founder or not, has truly been phenomenal. And so when Manish asks you to do something and says, could you do this? And I'm sorry, it's at whatever, 6:30 a.m. your time. I'm like, whatever. It does, of course, it's a yes. So delighted to be here. And by the way, again, that's another key lesson, is that investment in people and relationship with both Manish and Anjali represents so well. And an early lesson that I learned in my career, this was at Facebook, where I learned, the first time the Facebook executive team was visiting, I remember putting up we were so excited to talk about all that the business had done. I started my presentation with first talking about the business results, and the executives stopped me. At that time, it was Grady Burnett, who ran all of online sales. And he said, Kirthiga, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. I want to first know, how are you hiring the right people, building the right culture? Because if you do both of those and have this big, bold vision in place, business results will come. To me, that was a big aha in terms of how to build a business. And as my dear friend Rajesh Soni says, business models will come and go, but culture is very difficult to change. So it's something that people need to think about from the start. And by the way, I also have many founders say, but that's all like those soft stuff. I'm building my business, I'm scaling, I'm revving it up. I really don't have the time to focus on all of that. But how people show up, how they make decisions, how you handle conflict, all of that is nothing but culture, and you might as well be deliberate about it. So I would say, Anjali, a big part of my journey and the impact I have been able to make is about two things. One, it is a reflection of a poster that you will see in Facebook offices across the globe, which is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Again, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And some people like to phrase it as, what would you do if you know that you were successful? Just whatever question resonates with you, and the spirit of constant learning and being open to learning from all quarters, whether it's someone senior to you, your peer. I've learned so much from people who are just at the grassroots level in the organization.
No, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I remember anecdotally when I, was drafting my last email out of EY, spending 10 years there, I ended it with, and people kept asking me, what are you doing next? And I said, it's time to do, what I do if I'm not afraid. And that's really how I ended my email.
Amazing.
The other thing I want to, since you spoke about, your presentation at Facebook, just taking off from there, and the 6 years that you spent building Facebook India, from hiring the first teams to even, building the revenue engine and just scaling and growing the team across India and then beyond across Southeast Asia as well. India, the macro as well was at an inflection point. People were just getting onto mobile. But take us through some of those insights, both internally as you were building the team, as well as how the macro was shaping up for you, and some insights that would benefit some of our founders listening.
Amazing. One situation or anecdote that comes to mind as you ask me this question is, someone telling me, oh, can you refer growth marketers to our organization, but I hope it comes from an organization that's not so inherently viral as Facebook, because our organization and our product is not so inherently viral. And I look at them and I say, it's because they have the best growth marketers that the product was that way versus the other way around. So being very deliberate about hiring it was a key aspect. There was a key aspect about in God we trust. For everything else, we look at data was another key theme. Few other key lessons, like scale was just built into everything that we did. And I could spend hours just talking about different aspects of that. Some aspects that worked really well that I would really encourage all founders here to think about is the power of a big, bold vision. Facebook in India had 3 different charters. One, we had a global charter because we were building global operations that served their now 3.5 billion users. When we started, I remember hitting the 500 million user mark globally very quickly. In a few years, it was 1 billion, and now we're talking about over 3.5 billion. So how do you think of that kind of scale? And there's no amount of prep for that kind of scale. You really have to learn along the job and look at cues and continue to iterate. So we had a global charter. We also had a regional charter. Asia Pacific SMB business was started, the focus started in India. And then as it got to a several hundred million, we moved those headquarters to Singapore. And then 3, what's most relevant to the audience here is probably the India charter, although I'm so delighted about the number of companies here that have global presence and global businesses. So yeah, all of these lessons apply in Spain. So we had an India market charter. And there, Anjali, what we did was my first message that I said, I hope people remember the power of a big, bold vision. We actually sat with the whole team at the leadership level, at the grassroots level, because your vision is nothing but the combined vision of all of the people working in the organization. And we asked them to visualize what would we want Facebook India at an India market level to look like, call it 4 years from now. It was a long process. It was not overnight, and we went back and forth. And the vision for the India market, what we formulated was 100, 100, 100. I don't know if the audience can respond via chat, but I would have asked if they can, what they think the 100, 100, 100 is. Can they respond, Anjali and Manish?
You keep talking. I'm going to post a question in actually Q&A. They may catch it faster.
All right. So our 100, 100, 100, and I'm just going to tell you so we can use other questions, was 100 million users on the platform, not surprisingly. The second 100 was 100 million in revenue, and the third 100 was 100 million people that we wanted to touch through our community efforts. And people usually get the first one. And the second and the third one are a little off. They say 100% growth, which also was the case. But those were our 3 goals. And remember, at this time, we didn't even have 100 million people on the internet, right? And we had no commitment from Facebook headquarters to even build out a sales team. So all of this was a true BHAG of all magnitude, but it really bonded the team together. Facebook, like every other multinational company, was structured functionally. So user growth, for example, would report in regionally and globally, but this really bound the India team together. And sure enough, give or take a few quarters, we hit each one of these goals. So the power of a big bold vision, really investing in the mantra of in God we trust, and for all else we use data, and incorporating scale into everything that we do at all levels, were all key parts of building the business, Anjali.
Great. And I also would like to ask you to take us through some of what the narratives on those slides were when you made presentations back to the FP mothership to really convince them to double down on what was a frontier market like India in the 2010-11 timeframe. And what are some of the lessons for country managers in emerging markets, as well as for entrepreneurs, I would say?
Yeah, I would say when entrepreneurs, there's massive amounts of evangelization one is doing, right? Internally
Exactly.
and externally all the time. So if you can share whatever you can share.
Totally. One thing that everyone should know, people like the analogy on the anecdote about people asking me, oh, I want growth managers with products that are not as viral. There is an assumption that if you're building Facebook in India, you have an endless balance sheet and you can do whatever you want. But having been on both sides, both building companies within the umbrella of Facebook, as well as being on the other side as an investor, both early stage as well as growth stage, I will tell you, it's actually more difficult to get funding internally within an organization than get external money from investors. Okay, so it was really, really hard. And we had to really fight for every single headcount and make a business case for it. It was like going and presenting to your investors and making a case of why is it that you need the next 20 million or million, or again, even 100,000 for a set of hires that you needed to make. So what worked? There is, especially in this hybrid world, communication is just so important. How is it that you can really give all of your stakeholders the context that you have that others might not have? For us, it really was valuable to have the executives be on a steady visit to the country. I remember Chris Cox, the chief product officer, he came and he, somewhere along that way, we actually at headquarters instituted something called 2G Tuesdays, where the engineering team would work on a network that felt more like 2G, so that people would really feel and experience the pain that people in these markets were having, because it's very, very difficult for you to conceptually talk about it. So how is it that you can truly have the right stakeholders experience the need? I used to have, when I was building, even in prior organizations where I led product and engineering, we used to have this constant strife of engineering saying, sales doesn't sell what we have, and sales saying engineering doesn't build what we need. I used to send both of them to trips to go meet with the clients together. And it is so powerful to have the people who are building the product hear directly what the pain point is, and them then thinking about what is the solution that might just be far different from what even the sales team might be able to convey. So those were some techniques and tactics that we used to help make the case globally. And I guess the last thing is not giving up. It's very easy to say, it is hard to bubble up key messages, and this will happen anywhere, but knowing what you need to do and what you believe in, and keeping at it, persistence pays off. It might not happen in the time frame that you really want and have all the impatience that's really a key of success too, but know that sometimes it's just a matter of keeping at it, and the door will open.
It's super interesting, Kirthiga. I was actually a couple of moments just flashed in my head. One was, I don't know, it was Taj in Bombay, I think. Those early days, right? When I could see the tension between you seeing the opportunity you were on the ground, yet making sure that message is communicated effectively, right? And repeatedly, where the mothership sort of buys into it. So I just a moment flashed. I think we were having tea or coffee, and you were sharing some of those challenges back in the day. Quite interesting. And congratulations for winning that battle many times, and helping Facebook become what it did in India and other markets.
So when I relocated back, Manish, the business was doing 400 million. And just before I relocated, we got approval to double the sales and marketing team on the vision to $1 billion. And the team just crossed that threshold a few months ago. Kudos to Ajit and the fabulous team that they're doing there.
Congratulations. It's interesting. We have you and Rajan also was on the same day. I remember Google celebrated the 1 billion revenue number also. In quite in fashion. I'm sure you're being asked to come and join the party at Facebook India. I don't know if you can. If you can, please come and see us as well. But I'm sure you'll take a lot of pride in all the operating levers and the leadership team and talent that you put in place before you left the Indian shores.
It's been a delight to see the team go from strength to strength, and of course, a piece of my heart is always there.
Absolutely. Kirthiga, actually, that's a very interesting segue into something I was going to ask, and then I see a question pop in from Devanshu Jain, which links to this also.
Yeah.
The question I was going to ask is, when you think about, look, you've done, if I may use eclectic things, and like in a positive way, and done it so well everywhere in, growth investor and setting up investment vehicles to like leading SPAC with Athena that you're doing. I'm sure people will take notice of what Athena accomplishes over time, and NF7 Ventures, and of course on the corporate side, just building businesses. So you clearly have scaled yourself up many times. I don't know if it's through rebooting and pivots, or is it just a nice linear curve? But the question was going to be like, what things early in your career or anything else in your life has helped you scale in all of those dimensions so effectively? So trying to draw some of the lessons from your experience. And the question that Devanshu had is something similar, that I don't know if you pick these cues in your impressive corporate experience, or is it something else? Like, what would you advise to entrepreneurs as they think about scaling their own dimensions along with scaling of their companies and businesses and products?
There is scale that one can prepare for, and then there is scale that you simply have to learn on the job. And you have to be very conscious about both sides. I did the Everest Base Camp trek, right? I knew what to do, how to prepare for it, could read books about it, ask a lot of people, and do it. Then there is scale of building global operations for a company that hits a 500 million user mark, and then it goes all the way up to 3.5 billion, or going from writing $50,000 checks with F7 as where we wrote first checks for entrepreneurs to going to Softbank, where our minimum check size was 100 million. So those are just different kinds of scale that one has to. When you talk about what has prepared me for that, what I remember is my early childhood growing up, where we moved several different places. So you very quickly learn to be adaptable and go with the flow. You can just handle things that are thrown other way. So that's an important skill, adaptability. Two, an early lesson was also from my undergrad university, where because I moved so much, I could not apply to the government colleges. And I went to a private college, MGM College of Engineering in Nanded. I remember the first year, we didn't even have a campus. It was in a high school setting. And when I graduated with the university's second rank, which included the colleges I could not apply to. And it just seeped in mind something that my dad told me, where he said, you can do nothing with great opportunities, or you can make the most of the opportunities in front of you. And again, that's a lesson that I learned very early in life. So taking that to being in the spirit of constant learning, just absorbing from all different quarters and learning is something really important. Devanshu, a really important part of it is one, pick investors who can help guide you. And that's what you're doing here. Build a community of people, both who are in the same stage that you are, as well as companies that are ahead of you. For me, the framework when it comes to mentoring, or the question that you asked, it's the image of a person walking. There are people in front of you, there are people besides you, and there are people behind you. From people in front of you, seek inspiration. From people beside you, seek community. And from people behind you, lend them a helping hand. And the beauty of that picture is that applies no matter what stage of your company you're in. So just think about that.
Quite amazing. Wow, a lot packed in there to reflect on. There's a question actually was asked earlier, and I was thinking in the earlier panel, I was thinking of putting it, somewhere in the mind frame that when Kirthiga shows up, we have to ask her. It makes sense in this current context of the conversation. How have you retooled, reskilled yourself along the way, like in major significant ways? What has helped you?
When I started with Facebook in India, I was tasked with leading operations, global operations. I came from a product world, and although, of course, I'd interfaced with operations, I never really built operations before. Then when I raised my hand to go run sales, again, I was alongside people who had done sales for 30 years. When I joined investing, I joined people who have done just investing for 20, 30 years. That mindset of learning is important. Cheryl told me this when I started with Facebook, and I asked her, Cheryl, I want to really make a big impact. What's your advice for me? She said, Kirthiga, you haven't grown up in the operations organization, so make sure that you take the time to understand the nitty-gritty of what it means to run operations, because that is what will give you the strength to operate at a 20,000, 30,000 foot level. I took that to heart, and through my time with Facebook, when I was building operations, every week I would sit down with the operations team and really try to understand what's happening at that grassroots level. What are the users saying? What are they asking for? And fast forward that to when I ran sales, how do you do forecasting? How do you do tracking? Recognizing when I'm feeling that fear and anxiety, and just turning the table and say, okay, I'm feeling this anxiety. It's a really important part of my job. What is it that I need to do to get really good at it? Whether it was, in that case, working with a peer mentor, Jane Lung from Greater China, phenomenal sales leader. She came down, spent time with me, helped me ramp up. Fast forward, by the way, to investing. I remember the first few deals, I did all of the modeling myself. I downloaded Capital IQ, did all the modeling.
This is for audiences context, early days of Softbank, right? Yeah.
Softbank. This is at Softbank. Yeah. And by the way, we had many associates, and they were, what is she doing? Why is she not giving this to us? And of course, I took like 10 times more time from them getting my questions answered versus them just doing it themselves. But it was just so important for me to know what it takes to do this job in entirety, so that I could ask the right questions and then step back to them investment. So those are some things that I have invested in that have really helped me scale Manish and Anjali.
Very interesting. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and it's a bit of a tactical, highly contextual question, but this is about WeWork. And of course, just forewarning again, this session is being recorded and will be shared. So you're on the board, it's a listed company, say what you can, but it's just something that I couldn't have not asked, right? This company was almost written off in 2019. And then, of course, also saw the worst of what any company can see from a pandemic, COVID point of view, direct sort of headwinds, to what it has really done is mind-boggling. And it's clearly has, a lot of people have played a role here, and I know Kirthiga, you along with your partners at Softbank have played an instrumental role here. So the question was more or less specific about what WeWork may or may not have done, but what could one learn from this experience for, let's say, growth businesses, entrepreneurs that in India and elsewhere also are going through cycles, right? COVID has provided tailwinds to some, but headwinds to many. And if there is a winter coming, as it feels like from a private funding markets point of view, there could be another interesting, trough in the cycle. What lessons could you share from this experience of resurgence and, thriving and coming out of crisis and then thriving after that from the WeWork experience? If you can share, it'll be great.
Manish, a lot of people ask me, what made you decide to join the WeWork board at the time that you did? Because we were just coming off of the situation that you described. For me, one, it was a very strong connect with the mission. So, and I would say, think about, again, for founders, and are you focused on the right problem? Are you solving a real problem? And is there value in solving the problem? And in the case of WeWork, it was just very clear to me. I opened 7 offices when I was with Facebook in India. I would have loved to have a WeWork to be able to quickly scale and have the flexibility that WeWork offered. When Softbank Vision Fund opened its office in India, it was a WeWork office. So I have seen what I had to do without a WeWork office, and I've seen how quickly startups and large companies have been able to scale using a WeWork. So first, there was a very strong connect of the vision. And so I would say the first thing is make sure that you examine, are you solving a real problem, and is there value to solving the real problem? And coming to then what Marcelo, who took on as chairman, and Sandeep soon after, who came on board as a CEO, did, was a strong focus on fundamentals. We started the conversation talking unit economics, digging deep into what are the unit economics dynamics. Is there a path to making this a profitable business? And very clearly laying out a 5-year strategy that got us there was another very big part of the turnaround. And the third part of the turnaround was back to taking bold steps. There was a 5-year strategic turnaround plan. Sandeep, the CEO, came on board, and he said, why are we taking these many years to cut costs by $1 billion plus? We just should rip the bandage off and just get there faster. And it's the right thing for the business. It's the right thing for the people. And so that bold move was also what set us up at a much better place when COVID hit, because we had already started being very bold and very aggressive in getting the unit economics to shape and setting the company on a path to profitability. So those were my big learnings. And I saw this bold thinking and big giant steps, Manish, Anjali, also when Facebook went public. If people remember, the stock dipped significantly when it went public, and we were slammed at not having a mobile monetization strategy. What I saw Mark do was masterful in terms of how he shifted a 4,000 people company to focus on mobile, or changes where there was no longer a mobile division and a desktop division. There was just people working on a product that took both into account. If people walked in with product reviews that didn't start with mobile, he would literally stop the meeting and say, this meeting doesn't happen. We couldn't hire that quickly with mobile engineers, so we put a ton of training in place. How quickly we pivoted and the bold steps that we took was really instrumental in making that turnaround to where we are today.